The research station battle lasted 90 minutes. When it ended, the station was safe. The attackers were either captured or fled, and the Defiant looked like it had survived a war. Which it had. Multiple times in just a few days. Krelix had hours of recordings now. Videos showing human tactics in action. Ships that should have been destroyed instead pulling off impossible moves. Crews that should have panicked instead making jokes during combat. A captain who treated terrible odds like minor problems. When Coalition reinforcements finally arrived, they found the research station intact and the Defiant barely holding together. The ship had new holes in the hull. More systems were damaged. One entire section was sealed off because of damage, but the crew was alive. And so was everyone they'd saved. Admiral Corthan, the Coalition fleet commander, personally called the Defiant. "Captain Morrison, I'm reading your battle reports. These numbers can't be right." "They're correct, Admiral," Morrison replied. He looked exhausted but satisfied. "Krelix has independent recordings. He's been watching our operations." The Admiral focused on Krelix. "Observer. Your assessment." This was it. The moment Krelix had been sent for. Time to give an objective analytical report on human combat effectiveness. He looked around the bridge. At Lisa, whose impossible piloting had saved them over and over. At Chris, whose shooting had been perfectly accurate. At Sophie, who'd kept communications working through chaos. At Peter, who'd held the ship together through pure will and skill. And at Captain Morrison, who'd faced multiple impossible situations like they were routine. "Admiral," Krelix began slowly, "my initial assessment is that standard Coalition combat rules are inadequate for evaluating human effectiveness. They operate on principles that don't translate to conventional analysis." Explain. Human forces prioritize completing missions over preserving forces. They accept tactical risks that other species consider unacceptable. They maintain combat effectiveness through psychological factors that current models don't measure, and somehow it works. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Are you saying humans are better warriors than everyone else in the Coalition?" "No, Admiral. I'm saying humans are different warriors. They fight in ways nobody else does, which gives them advantages in situations where normal tactics fail. But it also means they take on more of those situations, because they're willing to." That sounds like a polite way of saying they're reckless. Krelix looked at Morrison, who just smiled and shrugged. "With respect, Admiral, I thought the same thing 2 days ago. Then I watched them save 3,000 civilians against impossible odds. Then I watched them protect an entire convoy when any reasonable analysis said they should die. Reckless means foolish. These humans are many things, but they are not fools." After the call ended, Morrison came over to Krelix's station. "You didn't have to defend us like that. Would have been easier to say we're crazy and be done. I'm an analyst, Captain. My job is to report truth, not comfort. The truth is your tactics, while unconventional, are devastatingly effective in the situations I observed." "Just the situations you observed?" Morrison raised an eyebrow. "I need more data before making broader conclusions," Krelix replied. His backplates rose in what might have been a smile. "Fortunately, based on the distress calls I'm seeing, you'll have plenty of chances to provide more data." The crew laughed. "He's learning," Lisa said. "Give him another week and he'll be charging into danger with us." "Absolutely not," Krelix protested. "I am an observer. I maintain analytical distance and objective perspective." "Sure," Chris agreed with a grin. "That's why you calculated firing solutions during the last battle. Very objective. I was ensuring my data was complete. If I'm reporting on your tactics, I need to understand all aspects." "And when you suggested that flanking move, that worked," Sophie added. "Professional courtesy. It would be inefficient to observe your defeat when a simple suggestion could prevent it." Morrison laughed. "Krelix, I think you're becoming human by accident. Give it another month and you'll be drinking terrible coffee and making bad jokes." Before anyone could respond, alarm sounded again. Another distress signal. "What now?" Morrison asked. "Medical transport under attack," Chris reported. 3 hours away. Coalition response is 7 hours. Attackers are unknown, but scans show they're heavily armed." Morrison looked at his crew, then at Krelix. "Observer. Want off before we do another crazy thing?" Krelix thought about it. He could leave. Transfer to the safe Coalition fleet. Go back to his comfortable lab. Write his report with the data he had, or he could keep watching the most fascinating combat doctrine he'd ever encountered. "Captain, my research remains incomplete. I should continue observations to ensure my conclusions are statistically valid. More cheers from the crew. All right, Morrison said, sitting in his chair. Lisa, set course. Chris, prepare weapons. Sophie, tell them we're coming. Peter, get those engines working however you can. As the Defiant changed course toward yet another impossible fight, Krelix opened his report file again. He'd been writing it in pieces between battles. Now he needed to finish it properly. He read what he'd written so far, then continued. Conclusion. Human forces are not better or worse than coalition standard. They are different. They excel in scenarios where conventional tactics fail, precisely because they don't rely on conventional thinking. They turn impossible situations into merely difficult ones through stubborn refusal to accept defeat. I recommend expanding human integration into coalition forces, particularly for high-risk operations where traditional approaches have failed. I also recommend psychological preparation for any species working with humans. Fighting alongside humans is intense and challenges basic assumptions about warfare and survival. Finally, I must note my research is ongoing. I will continue observations with the human vessel Defiant to gather more data on human combat effectiveness across various scenarios. This is purely for analytical completeness and not because I have developed any personal attachment to the crew or admiration for their methods. That would be unprofessional. Krelix paused. Considering that last line, it was true. He was being professional. The fact that he'd started to respect these crazy humans was irrelevant to his research. He saved the report and looked up at the main screen. Space stretched before them, and somewhere ahead was another group of people who needed help. Another impossible situation? Another chance for the humans to prove that impossible just meant nobody else had done it yet. The ship hummed with activity. Crew members moved through corridors preparing for battle. Weapons were checked. Systems were tested. Everyone knew their job and did it without panic or complaint. These humans had looked at a career of facing terrible odds and decided it was worthwhile. They'd chosen to be the ones who showed up when nobody else could. They'd accepted that they might die doing it, but they'd also decided that was better than letting others die when they could help. It was completely irrational by Vorthani standards, but watching the crew work, seeing their determination and skill, Krelix understood something important. Rationality was just one way to approach problems. Sometimes determination mattered more than logic. Sometimes courage achieved what calculation said was impossible. You're thinking hard over there, Lisa commented, passing by his station. Everything okay? I'm realizing my education was incomplete, Krelix admitted. I was taught warfare is about numbers and strategy, but humans have taught me it's also about will and heart. Lisa smiled. Took you long enough to figure that out? But yeah, that's basically it. We fight with our minds, but also with our hearts. Both matter. Your species should have died out long ago with such risky behavior. Maybe, but we didn't. Know why? Lisa leaned against his console. Because when times got really bad, when the numbers said we were finished, we looked at those numbers and said, not today. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, famines, and 1,000 other things that should have killed us. We survived because we refused to give up. That's in our bones now. It's who we are. And now you bring that same attitude to space, of course. Why would we change just because we left our planet? The galaxy has problems. People need help. We're good at helping, so that's what we do. It was so simple when she said it like that. So straightforward. Krelix people would have written entire strategic documents analyzing whether helping was optimal. Humans just did it because it needed doing. 2 hours to intercept, Chris announced. Running combat scenarios now. This one looks tough. They've got some serious firepower. They always do, Morrison replied calmly. We'll manage. We always do. Krelix watched the crew prepare. He recorded everything for his report. But he also just watched as an observer who'd learned to appreciate what he was seeing. These humans were remarkable. Not because they were better warriors than everyone else. Not because they had superior technology or tactics. They were remarkable because they cared. Because they showed up and because they refused to let good people suffer when they could do something about it. The math still said they should lose sometimes. The odds were often terrible. The risks were always high, but the humans kept winning anyway. Not because they ignored the math, but because they added factors to the equation that nobody else considered. After the battle, Captain Morrison invited Krelix to the crew mess hall. The space was small and crowded, but the crew made room for him somehow. They always seemed to find space when they needed it. Lisa slid a tray across the table. On it was a cup of something dark and steaming, along with some compressed bars. Coffee and protein bars, she explained. Basic human military food. Warning, the coffee tastes terrible, but after a fight it's almost sacred to us. Krelix carefully tried the coffee. His analysis confirmed it was indeed terrible. But every human in the room was drinking it with something like religious devotion. I still don't understand, he admitted. I've reviewed everything. By every tactical rule I know, you should have been destroyed at Tempest 3 in the first 30 minutes. The odds were impossible. Chris Hamilton laughed. He had a fresh bandage on his head. That's our thing. We're really bad at accepting impossible. But it's more than just refusing to accept facts, Krelix insisted. Your tactics, your movements, your coordination. It's like you work on completely different rules than any species I've studied. Morrison leaned forward, his face serious. Let me tell you something. Back on Earth before we reached space, there was a battle at a place called Thermopylae. 300 soldiers held off an army of maybe 100,000 or more for 3 days. They knew they would die. The math was perfectly clear. But they fought anyway because behind them were people who needed time to escape. They all died, every single one. But they won because those people got away safely. The enemy was delayed long enough that everything changed. Morrison gestured around the room. We remember that battle thousands of years later. Not because of the numbers, but because of what it meant. Meaningless death. Defiant hope, Lisa corrected. Big difference. Meaningless implies nothing good came from it. Defiant means you know the odds are terrible and you fight anyway, because the alternative is abandoning people who need you. Sophie Blake sat down with her own terrible coffee. Every human child grows up with stories like that. The Alamo, where defenders fought to the last. The Battle of Britain, where pilots flew again and again against huge odds. We have thousands of years of history teaching us that sometimes math matters less than the will to fight. Krelix tried to process this. His people had no such stories. When the Vorthani faced bad odds, they left, came back with more ships and fought when the numbers were good. It was smart. It was logical. It saved lives, but it also meant sometimes leaving others behind. You took damage, though, Krelix pointed out. Your ship barely works. If just 2 more mercenary ships had been there, you might have lost. Maybe, Morrison agreed. But there weren't 2 more. There were 12, and we stopped them. You can't plan based on what might happen. You plan based on what's real and you adjust. Your species is insane, Krelix said flatly. The whole room burst out laughing. Yeah, Chris agreed, raising his cup. Probably. But we're the kind of insane that shows up when people need help. The kind that looks at impossible odds and says, watch me. Peter Cross spoke from the corner. Want to know the real secret? We understand math fine. We just know numbers don't tell everything. They don't count determination. Creativity. The pure stubborn refusal to let bad things happen when we can stop them. Plus, Lisa added with a grin, we're really good at violence when needed. 10,000 years of fighting each other taught us how to fight things that aren't each other. Turns out those skills work on aliens too. Krelix sat back, his backplate slowly relaxing. My report will be hard to write. They sent me expecting proof that human tactics are reckless and can't last. Instead, I saw victories that shouldn't exist. Write what you saw, Morrison suggested. Not what they want to hear. Tell the truth. Humans fight differently because we are different. We don't calculate acceptable losses before battle. We calculate acceptable risks and we trust our people to succeed when it matters. And if they don't succeed, the mood shifted. Everyone got quieter. Morrison's voice dropped. Then we remember them. We honor them, and we make absolutely sure their sacrifice meant something, but we don't leave people behind if we can help it. Ever. That's not negotiable. Krelix understood then. It wasn't insanity, not exactly. It was a completely different way of thinking about war, where the Vorthani calculated acceptable losses and left if those numbers were exceeded. Humans calculated acceptable risks and pushed forward as long as there was any chance, however tiny, of saving lives. It was inefficient. It was dangerous. It resulted in damaged ships and wounded crews. It was also why 3,000 miners on Tempest 3 were alive. I think, Krelix said slowly, I'm starting to understand, though I'm not sure my people will believe my report. Lisa grinned. Then we'll make sure you have lots of video. Nothing convinces doubters like footage of impossible things. Speaking of which, Chris interrupted, we've got another alert. Sophie, what's the situation? Sophie checked her pad. Distress signal from a convoy near the barrier systems. Under attack by mercenary fleet. 12 ships. Convoy only has 3 escorts, Morrison stood. The rest of the crew immediately came to attention. How long to get there? 2 hours at maximum speed. Coalition response time is 6 hours. Then we better move fast. Morrison looked at Krelix. Still want to observe human combat? Krelix thought about his comfortable lab back on the Coalition station. He thought about warm certainty of mathematical models and predictable results. Then he thought about 3,000 miners alive because one ship full of crazy humans decided math didn't matter. I believe I should continue my research, he said carefully. For completeness, the humans grinned. And Krelix realized he'd just agreed to more impossible situations with people who made impossible look routine. His backplates shivered, but this time it wasn't entirely from fear. The alarm interrupted the moment. Another distress signal. This one from a research station under attack. Distance? Morrison asked, already moving to his command chair. 3 hours, Chris reported. Coalition response time is 8 hours. Attackers unknown, but scans suggest heavy weapons. Morrison looked at his crew, then at Krelix. Observer, you want off before we do something else crazy? Krelix thought about his options. He could transfer to the incoming Coalition fleet. Go back to his safe lab. Write his report based on what he already had. Or he could keep watching the most interesting combat style he'd ever seen. Captain, I believe my research is incomplete. I should continue observations for statistical accuracy. The bridge erupted in cheers and laughter. All right then, Morrison declared, settling into his chair with that confident smile. Lisa, set course for the research station. Chris, start running combat scenarios. Sophie, let them know help is coming. Peter, I need everything you can get from those engines. As the Defiant changed course toward another impossible fight, Krelix opened his personal log. He needed to start writing his report to the Coalition Council. He needed words to explain what he'd witnessed. Needed to convey the strange mix of calculated risk and pure determination that defined human combat. After several attempts, he started writing. Report. Human Combat Effectiveness. From Intelligence Officer Krelix Dyer, I was told to watch humans in battle. I had never gone before. I thought this was a weakness in my preparation. Now I understand it was necessary. You cannot understand human combat through reports and data alone. You must see it. You must watch them look at impossible odds and decide those odds don't matter. You must see them take damage that should destroy them and keep fighting. You must experience the moment when you realize they're not being reckless. They're being human. They fight with math, yes, but also with determination, psychology, flexibility, and something they call hope. This last thing cannot be measured but appears to be their most powerful weapon. Krelix paused in his writing. The ship shuddered as it pushed past safe speed limits, racing to save people they'd never met from threats they hadn't fully identified. It was tactically questionable, strategically unsound, mathematically inadvisable. It was perfectly, impossibly human. He looked around the bridge. Lisa was already plotting impossible maneuvers. Chris was preparing weapons. Sophie was composing reassuring messages. Peter was coaxing extra power from damaged engines. And Captain Morrison sat in his chair calm and confident, like this was just another day. Maybe for humans, it was. Krelix returned to his report. He had so much more to document, so many more impossible things to record and try to explain. His analytical mind told him he should be terrified. These humans were taking him into danger again and again. The odds kept being terrible. The risks kept being extreme. But something else in his mind, something he didn't know he had, was excited. For the first time in his careful, calculated life, Krelix was part of something that couldn't be predicted. Something that defied the numbers. Something that succeeded precisely because it refused to accept what should be possible. The Defiant raced through space toward another battle. It might not win, but Krelix was beginning to think that might. Not was very different from could not when humans were involved, and he wanted to see what happened next. The repair crews worked miracles during the 2-hour journey to the barrier systems. They patched holes in the hull with emergency sealant. They fixed broken systems with spare parts and creative solutions. Peter Cross and his engineering team somehow got the damaged engine working at 85% capacity. Krelix spent that time reviewing his recordings. He watched the battle over and over, trying to find a pattern he could explain. Every time he thought he understood something, the humans would do something that contradicted it. Lisa Grant found him in the observation room, staring at tactical displays. "You look like your brain hurts," she said, sitting down in a chair that squeaked. "I'm trying to understand how your species has survived this long with such dangerous tactics." "Dangerous?" Lisa raised an eyebrow. "We prefer to call it creative problem-solving. You charged at 18 enemy ships with one ship, and we saved 3,000 people. Seems like a good trade to me." She leaned forward, looking at his displays. "You're trying to fit us into your thinking, Krelix. That won't work. You need to understand how we think first, then explain it to me, in a way I can understand." Lisa thought for a moment. "Okay, your people, the Vorthani. You fight wars like chess games, right? Calculate moves, predict what happens, reduce losses. Very logical. That's correct. Humans don't play chess. We play poker." She smiled at his confused expression. "Chess is about perfect information and logical moves. Poker is about incomplete information, reading your opponent and sometimes pretending you have better cards than you do, because you know the other person will give up. We don't just calculate odds. We calculate psychology, morale, determination, and a dozen other things that don't fit into simple math. But mathematics governs reality. You can't just ignore basic principles. We don't ignore them. We acknowledge them and then look for the gaps. The spaces where determination and creativity can change the outcome." Lisa pulled up a new display. "Look at this battle we're heading to now. 12 mercenary ships against 3 escorts and civilian convoy. The math says the convoy loses, right?" "Correct. The mercenaries have much more firepower. Now add us. One damaged frigate with a crew everyone thinks is crazy. What does the math say?" Krelix ran quick calculations. "The outcome is still heavily in favor of the mercenaries. 13 ships against 4 is better than 12 against 3, but not enough to change things." "Right. But here's what the math doesn't count." Lisa leaned back. "Those mercenaries are fighting for profit. They want a quick, easy victory with few losses so they can sell what they steal. We're fighting because people need help. We have nothing to lose and everything to prove. Who do you think wants it more? Wanting something doesn't change physical reality, doesn't it?" Lisa challenged. "Back at Tempest 3, did you notice how the raiders started making mistakes as the battle went on? How their formation got messy and their shooting got worse?" Krelix had noticed. He'd thought it was because of damage and tiredness. "That was morale breaking," Lisa explained. "They expected an easy fight. When we didn't give up immediately, when we kept coming no matter what they did, they started doubting themselves. Doubt leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to defeat. Psychology matters. You're using enemy uncertainty as a weapon. Now you're getting it." Lisa smiled. "We're not just fighting with guns and shields. We're fighting with reputation, with stubbornness, with absolute refusal to accept defeat. And word spreads, right now, somewhere in this sector. Raiders and mercenaries are hearing about how the Defiant took on 18 ships and won. Next time they see a human ship, they'll think twice, maybe 3 times. Maybe they'll decide the cargo isn't worth it." Krelix processed this new way of thinking. "You're saying human combat effectiveness comes partly from psychological warfare against yourselves. Against ourselves? You maintain morale through determination, which lets you fight beyond what logic says you can do, which reinforces your determination. You're tricking yourselves into being more effective." Lisa laughed. "When you say it like that, it sounds weird, but yeah, basically. We call it courage or stubbornness or being too dumb to quit. Whatever you call it, it works." Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "All hands, we're approaching the convoy. Battle stations in 10 minutes. Krelix, please come to the bridge." As they walked back through the corridors, Krelix noticed something he'd missed before. Every wall had writing on it.
"Names, dates, short phrases in human languages. What are these marks?"
Lisa ran her hand over one set of words. "Crew members who served on the Defiant. Some are still with us. Some moved to other ships. Some died in battle. We remember all of them. It reminds us that this ship isn't just metal and computers. It's people. Past, present, and future. A memorial on a warship seems like it would hurt morale." "You'd think that," Lisa agreed. "But it does the opposite. It reminds us what we're fighting for. It reminds us we're part of something bigger, And it reminds us that if things go wrong, people will remember us. That matters to humans. Being forgotten is worse than death in our culture. They reached the bridge. The crew was already at their stations. The main screen showed the convoy, 15 civilian cargo ships surrounded by 3 coalition escort frigates, all under heavy attack from 12 sleek mercenary cruisers. Status, Morrison ordered. Chris Hamilton gave the report. The escorts are holding, but barely. 2 have taken heavy damage. Civilian ships are scattering, which makes them harder to defend. Mercenaries are using hit-and-run tactics trying to isolate individual cargo ships. Time until coalition reinforcements? 4 hours, sir. Morrison nodded slowly, studying the tactical display. Sophie, open a channel to the mercenaries. Let's see if they'll listen to reason. You're going to talk to them? Krelix asked, surprised. After what happened at Tempest 3? We always try talking first, Morrison replied. Sometimes people just need a good reason to make the smart choice. The mercenary commander appeared on screen. A Krogar, big and heavily muscled with multiple arms. His species was known for mercenary work across the galaxy. Human ship, the Krogar growled. This doesn't concern you. We have a legal salvage claim on these vessels. Legal salvage requires the ships to be abandoned, Morrison replied calmly. Those ships have crews actively fighting you. That makes this piracy, not salvage. Semantics. You're 1 ship. We're 12. Leave now and we'll forget we saw you. Morrison smiled that dangerous smile. Here's my offer. You leave now and we forget we saw you. Because if we fight, I'm going to make sure everyone in the sector knows that 12 Krogar mercenaries ran away from 1 human frigate. That'll be bad for business. The Krogar's expression changed. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He'd heard the stories, Krelix realized. The reputation Lisa mentioned was already working. You're lying. Nobody's that crazy. We just came from Tempest 3, Morrison said casually. Check the reports if you want. 1 ship, 18 raiders. We gave them the same choice. Some took it. The others didn't. Guess which group had a better day? The transmission ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then 2 mercenary ships broke formation and jumped away. A third followed. The remaining 9 regrouped, apparently deciding pride was worth the risk. Well, Morrison sighed. We tried. Lisa, take us in. Let's show them what happens when you bet against humans. As the Defiant accelerated toward the battle, Krelix watched the mercenary formation carefully. They were already making small mistakes. Spacing was slightly off. Response time was slower. The mere presence of the human ship had affected their confidence. Lisa had been right. Psychology mattered. The Defiant dove into the battle zone like a hunting bird. The ship moved with fluid grace despite its damage. Lisa's piloting was even more impressive this time because she was working with a partially damaged ship. She had to account for the broken engine, the weakened shields, the slower response time. She made it look easy. Chris started firing the moment they were in range. His targeting was precise and efficient. He wasn't wasting shots. Every burst of weapons fire had a purpose. Disable engines here. Break shields there. Force this ship to move that direction. The 3 coalition escorts, seeing reinforcement arrive, rallied. Their crews found new energy. They started fighting harder, shooting more accurately. 2 more mercenaries just jumped out, Sophie reported. 7 remaining. The smart ones are leaving, Morrison observed. The stubborn ones are about to learn an expensive lesson. The battle was intense but shorter than Tempest 3. The mercenaries were professionals, but they'd been hired for an easy job. This wasn't easy anymore. This was dangerous and costly. One by one, they reassessed whether the cargo was worth dying for. Most decided it wasn't. An hour later, only 1 mercenary ship remained. It was disabled and drifting. Its crew surrendered. All threats neutralized, Chris announced. Convoy is secure. The bridge crew didn't cheer this time. They were too tired. But Krelix saw satisfaction on every face. They'd done their job. They'd saved people. Morrison stood and stretched. Good work, everyone. Sophie, contact the convoy commander. Let them know they're safe. Peter, how's our ship holding up? We really need repairs, sir. We can't keep fighting like this, I know. Coalition reinforcements will be here soon. 8 raider ships broke away from the planet and rushed toward the Defiant. Their railguns and plasma cannons lit up the darkness of space. Bolts of deadly energy raced toward the small human ship. They chose poorly, Morrison said quietly. Lisa, start pattern Omega 7. Chris, I want firing solutions on all incoming ships. Sophie, open a channel to the colony. What happened next made Krellix question everything he knew about space combat. The Defiant didn't retreat. It didn't try to dodge away from the incoming fire. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the attacking ships. The ship's computer, working together with Lisa's piloting skills, started moving in ways that looked impossible. The ship rolled, twisted, and dove through the incoming weapons fire. Some shots missed by what looked like only centimeters. Target lock on Raiders 1 through 4, Chris announced. His voice was steady and calm. Firing. The Defiant's weapons were different from normal Coalition weapons. Instead of slow, powerful plasma charges, the human ship shot rapid-fire metal slugs mixed with precise laser beams. The combination was devastating. 2 Raider ships lost their shields in the first few seconds. A third took a direct hit to its engine and started drifting off course. They're breaking formation, Sophie reported. The remaining 5 are trying to flank us from both sides. Let them try, Morrison replied. Lisa, bring us around. Chris, prepare torpedoes set for proximity detonation. Krellix watched with his analytical mind working overtime. The humans weren't fighting like any species he'd ever studied. They weren't trying to cause maximum damage while taking minimum risk. They were fighting like the ship itself was a weapon. They used speed and crazy movements to create opportunities that shouldn't exist. A Raider ship finally managed to land a hit. The Defiant shook hard. Alarms blared throughout the bridge. Hull breach on Deck 3, reported Peter Cross, the engineering officer. Sealing the damaged sections now. No casualties. Keep us in the fight, Peter, Morrison ordered. Yes, sir. Rerouting power from non-essential systems. Sophie, what's happening with the colony? They're getting their defenses ready, sir. The Raiders are now splitting their attention between us and the people on the surface. Good. That's exactly what we want. The longer they focus on us, the more time those civilians have to prepare. Morrison looked at Krellix. You asked why we don't follow the math. This is why. Because math doesn't care about those 3,000 people down there. But we do. The battle kept going. Krellix watched as the impossible became real. The Defiant danced through space, dodging fire and returning shots with deadly accuracy. One by one, some Raider ships began pulling back. Their commanders were realizing this single human ship was more dangerous than they'd expected. Then Morrison gave an order that shocked Krellix even more. Open a channel to all Raider ships, he said. Tell them any ship that wants to leave has 30 seconds. After that, we're hunting down every single one. Captain, Krellix protested, you have them retreating. Now is the time to press your advantage. Destroy them while they're confused and scared. We're not murderers, Morrison said firmly. They run, we let them run. They stay, they die. Their choice. We always give a choice. 10 Raider ships broke away from the planet and jumped to faster than light speed. They were running. The remaining 8 ships regrouped. They were either too proud or too greedy to give up. Morrison sighed. Some people just don't learn. Chris, target their engines. Let's finish this without killing anyone if we can. The fight continued. The Defiant was taking damage, but it kept fighting. The human crew worked together like a single organism. Each person knew their job and did it perfectly. There was no panic, no fear. Just focused determination. Another hour passed. Then another. The Defiant was battered and smoking, but it was still fighting. The Raiders were in worse shape. Their ships had holes in them. Their formations were broken. They were making mistakes now, firing wildly and missing their shots. Finally, the last Raider ship's weapons went silent. Its engines stopped. It was floating dead in space. All Raider vessels disabled or destroyed, Chris reported. Threats neutralized. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping and cheering. Lisa whooped with joy. Chris pumped his fist in the air. Even Sophie, who had been focused on communications the whole time, was smiling widely. Morrison just leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked tired but satisfied. Sophie, contact the colony. Let them know they're safe.
Peter, damage report?
We're in bad shape, sir, Peter admitted. Multiple hull breaches. One engine is barely working. Shields are down to 20%. We need repairs badly. But we're alive? Yes, sir. We're alive, and so is everyone else on this ship. Then we did good. Morrison stood up and stretched. Chris, secure all weapons. Lisa, take us into orbit around the colony. Let's see if they need any help down there. As the Defiant slowly moved toward the planet, Krellix finally found his voice. I don't understand. I watched the entire battle. I recorded everything. By every tactical assessment I know, you should have been destroyed in the first 30 minutes. The odds were mathematically impossible. Chris Hamilton laughed. He had a bandage on his forehead now from where a console had exploded. That's the thing about humans. We're really bad at accepting impossible. But it's not just refusing to accept reality, Krelix insisted. Your tactics, your movements, the way you all work together. It's like you're operating on completely different rules than any other species. Morrison walked over to where Krelix was standing. Let me tell you a story. Back on Earth, thousands of years ago, there was a battle at a place called Thermopylae. 300 soldiers held off an army of hundreds of thousands for 3 days. They knew they were going to die. The math was clear, but they fought anyway because behind them were people who needed time to evacuate. They all died? Krelix asked. Every single one. But they won because the people behind them escaped safely. The enemy army was delayed long enough for the situation to change. Morrison gestured around the bridge. We remember that battle thousands of years later. Not because of the numbers, but because of what it meant. Pointless sacrifice? Defiant hope, Lisa corrected from her station. There's a big difference. Pointless means nothing good came from it. Defiant means you know the odds are bad and you fight anyway, because giving up means abandoning people who need you. Sophie joined the conversation. Every human child grows up hearing stories like that. The Alamo, the Battle of Britain, Wake Island. We have thousands of years of history showing us that sometimes the math doesn't matter as much as the will to fight. Krelix thought about this. His species had no such stories. When the Vorthani faced bad odds, they retreated, regrouped, and came back with more ships. It was logical. It was smart. It saved lives, but it also meant sometimes leaving people behind. You took heavy damage, Krelix pointed out. Your ship is barely functioning. If even 2 more raider ships had been there, you might have lost. Maybe, Morrison agreed. But there weren't 2 more. There were 18 and we stopped them. You can't plan based on what might have been. You plan based on what is and you adapt as things change. Your species is insane, Krelix stated. The entire bridge burst into laughter. Yeah, Chris agreed, raising his coffee cup. We probably are. But we're the kind of insane that shows up when someone needs help. Peter spoke up from his station. You want to know the real secret? We understand math just fine. We just know that numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't account for determination, for creativity, for the pure, stubborn refusal to let bad things happen when we can stop them. Plus, Lisa added with a grin, we're really good at fighting when we need to be. 10,000 years of fighting each other taught us a lot about how to fight things that aren't each other. As coalition reinforcements finally arrived, Krelix sat at his observation station and tried to process everything. He'd been sent here to confirm that human tactics were reckless and unsustainable. Instead, he'd witnessed a victory that shouldn't have been possible. The numbers said they should have died, but the humans had simply looked at the numbers and decided they didn't matter. 3,000 miners on Tempest. 3 were alive because of that. Decision Krelix began writing notes for his report. This was going to be very difficult to explain to his superiors. How could he make them understand what he'd seen? How could he put into words this strange human philosophy of fighting? First time seeing humans in real combat? Morrison asked, sitting down next to him. Yes, it was enlightening. And terrifying, that's fair. We terrify ourselves sometimes. Morrison smiled. But you know what? We'd rather be terrified and alive than logical and dead. And more importantly, we'd rather save people than save ourselves. The Defiant limped into orbit around Tempest 3. Below them, 3,000 people were safe. Above them, the wrecks of 18 raider ships floated as silent testimony to what happened when someone threatened people under human protection. Krelix looked at his data, at the recordings, at the impossible victory, and he realized he needed to see more. Krelix had been studying war reports for 12 cycles. His job was simple. Read the battle data, analyze the numbers, find patterns, make predictions. He was good at his job. The Vorthani people valued careful thinking and smart planning. They never rushed into fights. They always counted their ships first. If the numbers looked bad, they would leave and come back with more ships. This made sense. This was logical. So when Ambassador Torvan called him to the observation deck, Krelix expected another normal briefing. Maybe some new data to review, maybe a question about enemy ship movements. He did not expect what came next. You will go with the human ship called Defiant, the ambassador said. His mandibles clicked slowly, the way they did when he was thinking hard about something. The council wants someone to watch how humans fight. We keep getting reports that don't make sense. We need to know if these reports are true. Krelix felt his backplates shake a little. He had read those reports. Humans charging at enemy ships when they should run away. Humans fighting when the math said they would lose. Humans treating war like it was personal instead of just numbers and logic. Sir, wouldn't a machine observer give better data? Krelix asked. The humans asked for you specifically. They said to send someone who thinks they're crazy. They want to show you why they win. The human ship Defiant was smaller than Krelix thought it would be. Vorthani warships were huge and covered in thick armor. They were built to take hits and keep flying. The Defiant looked thin and fragile. It had smooth lines and very little armor plating. It had way too many engines for a ship that size. Captain Jake Morrison met him at the airlock. The human was tall with short brown hair. His eyes seemed to look at everything all at once. When he smiled, it showed his teeth. Krelix knew this was supposed to be friendly, but it looked dangerous. Welcome aboard, Krelix. I hope you're ready for a good show, Morrison said. He slapped Krelix on what passed for a shoulder. Come on, let me show you around and meet everyone. The bridge was cramped. All the stations were close together. The crew moved around each other with practiced ease. What surprised Krelix most was the mood. They were joking, laughing. A female officer named Lisa Grant was drinking something hot and dark from a cup while running combat practice programs on her screen. Sir? We got confirmation, said Chris Hamilton, the tactical officer. He was stocky with broad shoulders. Raiders hit the colony on Tempest 3. 18 ships, big ones. They're stealing everything from the mining facilities. Morrison's face didn't change much, but Krelix felt the whole room shift. The jokes stopped. Everyone suddenly looked sharper, more focused, like predators who just spotted prey. How many civilians down there? Morrison asked. About 3,000. The colony didn't have time to get people out. Krelix checked his datapad quickly. 18 large cruisers against one small frigate. The math was clear. Very clear. Captain Morrison, the rules say we should call for help. The nearest coalition battle group could be here in 14 hours. Morrison looked at him. In that moment, Krelix understood what he'd seen in the ambassador's eyes earlier. It was pity. The human felt sorry for him. In 14 hours, everyone down there will be dead or taken as slaves. Lisa, how long until we get there? 40 minutes if we push the engines hard, sir. Then let's not keep them waiting. Battle stations, everyone. Time to do our job. Alarms started blaring. The crew ran to their positions. Krelix felt his mind struggling to understand what was happening. They were really going to fight. One ship against 18 ships, it made no sense. The tactics were impossible. The math said they would die. And as the Defiant's engines roared to life, pushing the small ship faster than Krelix thought was safe, he realized something that made his stomach feel strange. The humans didn't care about the numbers. They didn't care about the odds. They were going anyway. The ship shook as it accelerated. Krelix grabbed onto a rail to steady himself. Around him, the human crew worked with calm efficiency. No panic, no fear. Just focused determination. Arrival time now 38 minutes, Lisa called out. Her fingers danced over her controls. I'm pushing the engines to maximum safe speed. Push them past maximum, Morrison said calmly. Those people don't have time for us to be careful. Aye, sir. Going past the red line, the ship shook harder. Krelix's inner ears screamed that they were going too fast. Way too fast. But the humans just kept working. Running combat scenarios now, Chris said. Uploading known raider ship configurations to the tactical computer. Good. I want firing solutions ready the moment we drop out of faster-than-light travel, Morrison ordered. Sophie Blake, the young communications officer, looked up from her station. Sir, should I prepare a distress call? In case we need emergency assistance? Morrison shook his head. No distress calls. We're not going there to die, Sophie. We're going there to win. Krelix couldn't help himself. Captain, this is suicide. One ship cannot defeat 18. It's mathematically impossible. Morrison turned to face him fully. You know what else was mathematically impossible? Humans leaving their home planet. We're too heavy. Our bones are too dense. The rocket fuel requirements were crazy. But we did it anyway. You want to know why? Why? Krelix asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Because math is a tool, not a prison. Math tells you what's likely. It doesn't tell you what's possible. And humans have gotten really good at turning impossible into just really difficult. Lisa laughed from her station. Plus, we're too stubborn to know when to quit. That too, Morrison agreed with a grin. Krelix looked around the bridge again. These humans were serious. They really believed they could win. They had looked at 18 enemy ships and decided the number didn't matter. It was the most irrational thing he'd ever witnessed. 30 minutes to arrival, Lisa announced. Chris, what's the status on those firing solutions? Almost ready, sir. I'm accounting for multiple engagement scenarios. If they cluster together, I recommend torpedo spread. If they stay spread out, we'll need to use hit-and-run tactics. Good thinking. Prepare for both. The minutes ticked by. Krelix tried one more time to make them see reason. Captain, please. The acceptable loss protocols for coalition forces clearly state that when facing odds of 18-1, retreat is mandatory. You must wait for reinforcements. We're not coalition forces, Morrison said without looking away from his displays. We're human forces working with the coalition. Big difference. We follow our own rules. But the math doesn't care about your rules. Then the math is about to get a really surprising lesson. The ship began to slow down. They were approaching normal space. Approaching the battle zone. Approaching 18 enemy ships that would try to kill them. Krelix realized his backplates were shaking again. But this time it wasn't just fear. It was something else. Something he didn't have a word for in his language. These humans were walking into certain death with smiles on their faces and jokes on their lips. They were either the bravest beings he'd ever met or the craziest, maybe both. Dropping out of faster than light in 10 seconds, Lisa said. Her voice was steady, calm, like this was just another day at work. All stations. Final checks. Morrison ordered. Weapons ready. Chris confirmed. Shields at maximum. Another officer reported. Communication standing by, Sophie added. Morrison leaned back in his chair. He looked relaxed, completely at ease. All right, people. Let's go show some raiders why you don't mess with human colonies. And let's show our observer here what humans do when the math says we should lose. 3, 2, 1, Lisa counted down. The ship shuddered, and reality snapped back into focus. The view screen blazed with light and color. And there, hanging in space like a death sentence, were 18 enemy warships surrounding a small brown planet. Krelix's analytical mind quickly processed what he was seeing. The raiders had surrounded the colony. They were in a standard attack formation. Heavy weapons. Good shields, professional setup, and the Defiant was flying straight toward them like a meteor heading for a planet. The raiders noticed them immediately. How could they not? The human ship had just appeared out of nowhere and was heading straight for them. We're being hailed, Sophie said. They want to know if we're serious about engaging them. Morrison's smile grew wider. More dangerous. Tell them yes. Also tell them they have 60 seconds to leave or we'll consider them hostile. Krelix felt his mind trying to break. You're giving them a warning? Captain, surprise is your only advantage. We're not murderers, Krelix. We give everyone a choice. Always. Morrison's voice was hard now, serious. They can run and live, or they can stay and face the consequences. Their choice. The raiders answered with weapons fire.